So after 3 long years, we finally got our permanent approval to live off grid. To give you a little history, backstory to this, and a lot of you will know this, but just bear with me. 7 years ago or something, 6 years ago, decided to quit our jobs. It was a pretty stressful life. We had all our debt was paid for, and we had somewhat of a savings account, came up with a business plan, and decided to travel the country for a few years. So we got a pop-up camper. I know a lot of people thought that was crazy, but we did okay in it. Traveled all over the place on the east side. We didn't make it to the west side in the pop-up. Someone burned it down while we were in Florida. So we built us a little truck camper and put it on the back of the truck. It was pretty neat. And we continued traveling for a year or two more and decided that we were going to give it up. It wasn't exactly what we had hoped it would be. Carolyn and I still have some pretty fond memories of it, but we knew things were going to get pretty hard. For some reason, it just seemed like things were getting bad. They were shutting down more and more campgrounds. It really just became a homeless camp. So they were restricting how many people could go in and shutting things down. So we just knew it was a matter of time. So we thought we'd better get out before we couldn't find any place to sleep. And different Walmarts. You couldn't even stay in Walmarts anymore. Parking lot, which I don't think we ever did that. We were in Arizona and decided that in the Coconino National Forest actually, and decided we wanted to quit. And we were discussing different things, maybe getting a little schoolie bus or something. And then it occurred to us, well, why not just get a piece of property and build us a little tiny house? So Carolyn immediately started looking into it. This was in August of, I guess, 2019. She immediately started finding things. We were in Texas throughout the winter. We were going to these free campsites all around Lubbock, Texas. And you can stay there 2 or 3, 4 days, depending on the campground. And it had free electric and free water. Now, a lot of them asked for a donation, which was kind of nice to be there because it was cold. We had a little space heater that kept us warm in the camper. Well, Carolyn decided that there was an opportunity we just couldn't pass up. She found several pieces of property, but this one she thought it was pretty good. It was 10 acres with a well and a stream going through it. But when we got there, we realized it was going to take a lot of work to be able to get onto the property. Probably another $10,000. So we passed that one on by and went to my mom's house. We parked in her yard. This was, I guess, in January. And we came down here. She liked this property for some reason a lot. I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan of it at first when she showed it to me online. But then when we got here, I realized this was pretty fantastic. We had a well on it, and it had that trailer frame that we could build a tiny house on it. And when I saw the trailer frame, initially I didn't think of anything other than, well, I got to figure out a way to get rid of it. But she looked at it and said, well, we can build our tiny house on that. And I was like, oh, yeah. We had a foundation and every trailer pad foundation. It had everything we needed. We pretty much bought it instantly. I think within a couple days we had it purchased. We met the guy at the title company. And I gave him the money, gave the title company their money, and it was ours. Well, we didn't come back to the property, I don't think, until like March. But we started getting everything set up that we needed, purchasing things. This place at the time didn't have an address. And it was pretty complicated trying to get an address. You have to go through the 911 call center at the sheriff's department. And they had to come out, and it had to have a place on it. But when you called the permit company, they needed an address. So how do you build anything without an address? How do you get an address without a building permit? Well, the guy came down and inspected it and saw the trailer pad, the foundation, and said, oh, okay, well, at least it has a foundation. That's something. So they went ahead and gave us an address. But I got a little ahead of myself. So we stayed at Mom's house because she had an address. And we could buy the solar panels online, Amazon. So we got a lot of things collected up. We built the base to our truck camper. The floor to the truck camper was the truck bed. So the truck camper sat on the rails of the truck. So when we lifted it up, we had to set it on a floor, a base. So I built that. We bought the well pump, which took a lot of investigation at the time because we needed to figure out how to run it with our little 110 volt generator. So we found a 110 volt well pump. So we got here, and that month, the pandemic struck. And at first I didn't think much of it. I mean, we were here, our freezer was full of food, and we were getting, when we were traveling, where we could fill that freezer about 30 days worth of food. And it was just one of these little apartment sized refrigerators with the freezer on top. We got pretty good at doing that. Of course, we had a lot of different foods that we now are carnivores, but back then we still had noodles and different things. So we had a pretty good stockpile. I don't know why we did that. I guess because I figured I didn't know how long it was going to take to get set up and how often we could go to town. I mean, we were out here in the middle of, I don't know, it's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's a long drive to any cities that has grocery stores. There's a Dollar General down the road a ways, but at the time it didn't even have groceries. It was just a small Dollar General. Now they've expanded a little bit. The first day we got the camper off onto the ground. I twisted my ankle, so that made everything 10 times harder. And then we put the well pump in. And I figured if we had a well pump and a place to stay, we were in good shape, plenty of food. But we really struggled to get materials so we could start building a tiny house. Our plan was to spend $500 a month for 10 months, which would be $5,000 to build the tiny house. And that's exactly what we did. The problem is that during the pandemic, prices were going up dramatically. So Carolyn did her magic like she always did and got on Facebook Marketplace and started looking for materials. We found OSB really cheap, some windows, doors. I was able to use a lot of materials from the trailer frame, the mobile home trailer frame, to build the floor. I had to modify the floor. I've been complimented on that a lot, on how we did that, because the boards that we took off, some of them, well, they were rotted, so we had to trim them up, which means they didn't lay across the trailer like they did when it was new. So I had to basically put an extra beam in the center of the trailer so I could have half boards going across. That worked out pretty good. Haven't seen any problems with it. I mean, it's always concerned me, but I bolted it to the trailer frame and it's not a problem. But that, I would say, was probably the weakest part of the tiny house build. But everything else is pretty solid. Well, I mean, that's pretty solid too. I haven't had any problems with it. Like I said, I bolted it to the trailer frame, so I can't see it moving. Also at the same time, get firewood. And that was quite the chore. So we built an outdoor heat exchanger for the camper because I didn't want to run propane, especially during the pandemic. Wasn't even sure where we could get propane. And at the time, I didn't find any refill facilities where we could go and refill the tanks. So that means you go to Dollar General and you spend a fortune, $20, to fill your propane. But I can go over to this refill now that I found it and get it for $12. So it's an $8 savings. But I couldn't imagine heating with propane through the winter. We had to figure something else out. So I built this heat exchanger, and we used all the scraps from the woods here. I mean, there's still some remnants of it. You can see that this is some dead trees that I cut down right here. I actually put a piece of rotted wood on this stump here. So I knew that that was a tree that we had to, it was a rotted tree that we cut down. I don't know why I did it. Just wanted everybody to know, I guess. But regardless, we have, I think, 8 cords of firewood. And we went through every bit of that in that heat exchanger for a little bitty camper. It was pretty inefficient. But what I will say is it kept us warm. Well, at the same time, we kept at the wood, getting firewood. We started going off-site to get firewood. Now we have 15 years worth of firewood for the tiny house. People will say, well, won't it rot? It'll rot. It won't rot. It's oak. I've told the story before. We came down here in the woods and we saw a pile of firewood that had been covered up with a piece of sheet metal. And it hadn't been touched since like the 90s. So by January, so 1 year later after we bought the property, January, we had the tiny house built and we moved into it. And we had this winter vortex coming down from Canada. We had to get out of that camper. We weren't going to survive that vortex. Of course, all our firewood was so wet that that wood stove up there just wouldn't burn it. we got through it. It was hot in there because we just kept putting wood in, trying to keep it lit. But now everything's perfect. The thing we have to realize is the economy has been pretty tough ever since the pandemic. Trying not to make this too political, but it is political. When we got here, the gas prices were like $1.50. And now, well, I mean, they're starting to drop now, but for the last 2 years, they've been in the $3 range, almost $4. So we had the generator we had to run. Of course, then we converted over to solar panels. But I just got them because I didn't have time to a spot where now we can run the well. We just got us a wash machine. We run the freezer. We don't have to run that generator hardly at all. We have to run it in the wintertime more than the summertime. Like today, we'll have to run it this evening. Throughout the summer, I didn't run it at all. So we have 12 solar panels now, but when we got here, I think we had 8. Then after we got here, we struggled running the air conditioner. We don't have an air conditioner now because we're in that tiny house and it's under shade trees. But in that camper, it was terribly insulated out there in the hot sun. So we bought us a little window air conditioner and ran it off solar panels during the hottest portions of the day. So I got 2 more solar panels so we could run that. But I mean, we weren't running it because now, this year, I just found out we needed another charge controller. Was our problem. But I didn't have time to work on the solar panels. But now we got it all perfected. See, here's the thing. We paid $4,200 for this property. 10, 15 years ago, I would have thought that was a lot of money. But today, being debt-free, having a piece of property for $4,200, it seemed really reasonable to me. It had a well on it. If you think about it, the well in itself pays for this property. It would cost $5,000 to dig, drill a well. So I got a well and property. Now I got the well working to perfection. I really do think I can sell this place for more than what we paid for it. And then, of course, we got the tiny house. I'm not sure anybody would really want to live in it, but they could do a couple things. One, make it a shed. Or 2, since this is kind of a touristy area, I could imagine somebody coming down here throughout the summer for a little fishing cabin. They can go over to the lake, park a boat here. So people might want to buy it. And it's got water and solar panels for electric. It'd be pretty cool for a camping trip, a week-long camping trip, vacation, once a year. Hunting would be another one. But the tiny house, it only costs $5,000. I don't think I would ever be able to sell the tiny house because we didn't build it to code, which was the appeal of what we did, because if we'd have built it to code, we'd probably had to triple the price of what we paid for it. It's not something that I would advertise in the sale of it. It's just shed. I'd advertise a shed. They can do whatever they want with it when they move in. But I do believe this is the way of the future. We got a president who has just destroyed this economy. Inflation's up, and I know they're saying it's down and all this stuff, but it's up. We can tell when we go to the grocery store. We're spending more than we did 3 years ago. People can't buy a house anymore, especially young people. And then, of course, we have the chickens. Now, I know we're carnivores, so all we eat is meat-based products. And a lot of people just can't do that. I don't know why they can't do it. They could do it if they wanted to, but I need variety in my diet. You don't need variety. You're addicted. That's not a need. That's an addiction. Sugar is an addiction. Once you become a carnivore, you don't need variety anymore. So we got the chickens, and they feed us. And we're pretty much self-sustaining now. I mean, we still go out and get food, but we really don't have to. We could figure out a way to manage that. But I do think that young people, especially, is going to have to start thinking about reducing their living space. Back in the 20s, living spaces used to be, I believe, 100 square feet per person. So if you had a 4-person house, it was 400 square feet. Well, now you need 1,000 square feet per person. Banks just keep making housing bigger and bigger and bigger. I think it's going to start shrinking again. More and more people, young people, are buying tiny houses. And more municipalities are making them legal. That was the biggest problem. But if you can find a place and call it your own, a little place like this, people seem to think they need 20 acres to live off grid or in a tiny house or whatever. You don't. This is an acre and a half. And we do quite well. We got the chickens and the firewood and a tiny house and solar panels, and we still got all this space back here that's untouched. We get our firewood from people who cut it down. You go to Facebook Marketplace, look for free stuff. You'll find firewood. So it's doable, and you don't have to pay hardly any money to live. I know some people are going to say, especially the trolls and the haters, this is no way to live. I actually think it's the perfect way to live. So if you click this up next box, take you to a video where I was talking about how I've been lying. So I hope I can inspire you to find true meaning in life, so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.